Incoming time flux.
Yes, I am a god. The god of speed.
Hi everyone, happy Crisis on Infinite Earths. This is going to be my Flash Season 6 Episode 1 video, because we just found out that Godspeed is totally coming back right away. Surprise, surprise, they completely changed the timeline. So it sounds like they're going to completely redo the Godspeed character, so we'll break everything down. We're doing a new round of that IMAX ticket giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave your favorite Flash villain on the video. I'll name a new winner at the end of this. The reason why we know about Godspeed coming back is because they're filming episode 1 for most of the shows. Even Stephen Amell tweeted this picture of Arrow's first episode getting ready to film. "One last time" was his caption, because this is the last season of Arrow. On the set of The Flash, they're filming a battle outside, and it's The Flash fighting Godspeed. It doesn't look like the same actor either. He looks a little bit different. He's grown a bigger beard there. It looks like The Flash rips his mask off at some point during the fight so that he can see who he's fighting. So I'm guessing it's probably still August Hart, but because there's been so many timeline changes as of the end of Season 5, it's basically a completely different character. During this fight, they also debut the brand new Killer Frost costume. Danielle Panabaker posted this to her Facebook account. I think because so many paparazzi were taking pictures of this big fight, they're like, okay, we'll post a nice shiny version of this. We're not trying to hide it. So just expect it to show up during the Comic-Con trailer next week. That's right, Comic-Con trailers for all this stuff dropping next week. But the larger question is what's going on with Godspeed during Flash Season 6, because I never expected him to be the main villain based on the way they treated him during Season 5, and he's from Nora's time in 2049, so how would he be back in present day now? It all probably has something to do with Crisis on Infinite Earths, so there's only a couple of ways that he can actually be here now, but a lot of you have been asking who the villain for Flash Season 6 is going to be, and there's a lot of really good guesses I've seen. But you have to think about this season differently for all the shows because of Crisis on Infinite Earths. So what they're doing is the first half of the season on all the shows is going to be way more comic booky than you ever seen before, particularly on Arrow and The Flash. But you have everything that's building towards Crisis in the first half of the season. Then you have a 5-episode crossover that's going to take place broken up into 2 different parts. There'll be 3 episodes in December, and then 2 episodes of the crossover won't happen till all the shows come back in January after the hiatus. Arrow's only got 10 episodes this season. All the other shows have the regular amount, so they'll continue on the back half. They'll go on to whatever their regular plots are in the wake of Crisis on Infinite Earths. However that wraps up, it'll change the universe going forward. Worlds will live, worlds will die, as the poster says.
Worlds will live, worlds will die, and the universe will never be the same.
So whatever's happening on The Flash this season, there'll be some stuff that's affected by Crisis, but they're already doing their own plot. So whoever the villain is for The Flash Season 6, the main villain, it'll have something to do with Crisis, but it won't be completely tied to that. So Reverse Flash is not going to be the main villain this season, even though he's a big part of what's going on. They revealed the title of the second episode, Season 6, Episode 2, is called A Flash of the Lightning, and that's the title of the story where Barry sacrificed himself during the original comic book, Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I think it's pretty safe to say that Barry's not going to die or sacrifice himself completely in the second episode of the season. So Episode 2 is probably just the episode where they address the ramifications of what's happening with the accelerated timeline for Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover this year. But you'll remember that the last we saw of Godspeed was he was in 2049 in that special Nora episode where they were explaining how she realized she got powers, and they basically did a highlight reel of the first 3 seasons of The Flash with the villains from the first 3 seasons, so that the writers could say that all the same stuff that happened to Barry the first couple of seasons also happened to Nora, but in slightly different ways. In pursuit of that, they changed the Godspeed character from the comics to make him more like Zoom, turned him into a Velocity 9 speedster. He was still August Hart, but he was a former Mercury Lab scientist from Nora's future who was fired when he was caught experimenting on humans trying to recreate the Velocity 9 formula. In the comics, after the Speed Force storm at the beginning of Flash Rebirth, a bunch of people got speed. Comic book Godspeed went around stealing all their speed and killing them. On the TV show, August Hart wound up killing all of his test subjects. So they were doing a version of comic book Godspeed, just changing it to fit with this future timeline. But here's the thing about that whole Godspeed episode, the character in the future timeline, is that Nora was completely erased from the timeline at the end of season 5 because her entire timeline was changed as part of Reverse Flash's secret double cross to free himself from prison in 2049. So it wasn't just Nora that completely changed everything that happened originally in that future, so August Hart becoming Godspeed. All that stuff was wiped from the timeline, basically giving the Flash writers a do-over for everything with the Nora character, with the Godspeed character, anything that happened in the future, the Red Death character that they name-dropped during that future episode. So where did this new Godspeed come from? There's only a couple ways he could be here in present day fighting the Flash, so I just broke this down top 5 style, and most of it has to do with Crisis on Infinite Earths and the alterations to the timeline. Number 5, it could still be the original Godspeed, and he somehow found a way to make more Velocity 9 while he was stuck in prison in 2049. He escaped and then got into the time stream to protect himself from the changes to the timeline at the end of the season. Then he could have come back in time to change the past, trying to create a new future timeline that would benefit him more. Speedsters coming back to the past to alter the timeline to benefit them is straight out of the Reverse Flash's playbook. 4, the timeline changes could have created a new version of August Hart Godspeed who's still from the future in 2049, whose backstory just happens to be different, and he's come back in time to steal something, change something about the timeline to benefit himself in the future. So same basic idea, just very different origin story for who this version of August Hart Godspeed is. 3, Reverse Flash, who escaped at the end of last season and teased Crisis on Infinite Earths. That scene was so great because it sounds like he knows exactly what's coming up.
See you in our next crisis.
Reverse Flash could be behind this new version of Godspeed, manipulating him the same way he manipulated Nora to alter the timeline, sending him back in time to harass Team Flash and set a larger crisis plot in motion. Because what they do a lot of times with the first episode of each new season is use it as a sort of bridge between the stuff they were doing last season and the new different stuff they're going to be doing in the new season. The whole idea last season is that Reverse Flash was manipulating the timeline in the past to benefit him in the future. So Godspeed versus the Flash in episode 1 could be a bit of a holdover wink at that before they get into the actual plot of the season. Reverse Flash prides himself on having the most nuanced understanding of how the timeline works. There was even that crazy quote, "I am the only one who understands what's going on." So he's probably one of the few people that understands why everything's happening in 2019 now instead of 2024, laughing the whole way there. Like, oh, just you wait, Flash. Just you wait till you see what happens to you now because of all the stuff that I've done. 2, the changes to the timeline could have just vastly sped up when Godspeed became Godspeed so that he's more of a present-day recurring villain instead of being a villain for Nora. And then number 1, probably most likely scenario, is that he's just the tip of the Flash villain iceberg in Season 6, and because of Crisis on Infinite Earths this year, the writers are going to make the Flash run the gauntlet of all the most comic booky villains they can possibly do. And they'll use that opportunity to fix a lot of the issues, quote-unquote, that the characters had when they were last used. So wasn't really hot about some of the stuff they did with the Godspeed character during Season 5, the way they changed his backstory, kind of made him a once-off villain for Nora. So it sounds like this is an opportunity for them to fix that in the first episode and then pave the way for the actual main villain of the season to come a few episodes later. Because every season on The Flash, you never really meet the biggest villain in the very first episode. They might tease him a little bit in a post-credit scene, but the main villain usually doesn't become a really big actual part of the plot until a little bit later, the first half of the season. The thing that they're doing differently this year, though, is because of Crisis on Infinite Earths, is that they're breaking the seasons up into a couple different villains, so don't be surprised if there's a main villain for the first half of the season on our way into Crisis. Then after Crisis completely changes the foundation of the DCTV universe, they'll do something a little bit different, so that we're not stuck with another Cicada situation like last year, with them just dragging that whole plot out over 22 episodes. Just was not a huge fan of the Cicada character in the way that they doubled down on Cicada in the second half of the season. Based on what I think they're doing with Godspeed this season, it's also possible that they do the Red Death character, because if Red Death was going to be a speedster, I wasn't expecting them to be the main villain of Flash Season 6. The only way that they make Red Death the main villain is if it's a non-speedster character and they change the character even more from the comics, which they already have to do because they can't do Batman, and I don't expect it to be a Batman comic book Red Death twist where you have like a Batman character combined with a Flash character from an alternate universe. Red Death in the comics is a dark universe version of Bruce Wayne that combined himself with a Barry Allen from his Earth to create a new character that he's dominating in a very Firestorm situation where you have a Barry Allen trapped, his consciousness trapped in the body with the Red Death, but the evil version of Bruce Wayne is sort of in control of the body, doing all these terrible things with those powers. There is a version of Batman that's going to be on Titans Season 2, played by Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones, but that's the only Batman you're going to see on any kind of DC comic book TV show. And the Titans stuff is in a different universe than what's happening with DCTV and all the Crisis stuff. I love the new Killer Frost costume. It looks way more comic booky, inspired by the Rebirth version of the Killer Frost costume. Her shoulders are exposed, the snowflake symbol is way more prominent on her chest. It's a little more form-fitting and less of a big heavy winter coat like we saw during Season 3. Like I said, they're dropping Comic-Con trailers for all this stuff next week. But here's the problem though, all that DCTV stuff like the Flash panel is happening right in the middle of Marvel's Phase 4 panel where they're showing off a whole bunch of footage from all their Phase 4 movies. So what'll probably happen is I'll do my Marvel video that night, and then I'll do my Flash trailer video and DC TV stuff the next morning on Sunday. As long as you have alerts enabled for my channel, you'll see all the videos when I post them. If you have any big questions about what's going on in the DC universe, just leave all your questions in the comments and I'll add it to the list of videos that I'm making. Congratulations, Christian Smith. You're the giveaway winner from my last big DC video. Please email me on the About page of my channel so I can get your details. Click here for that new Superman Shazam deleted scene, and click here for all my Spider-Man Far From Home Easter eggs and post-credit scene. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. See you guys tonight.